second part of Unit 3, Project Management. So in the first part, we looked at how to create a Gantt chart, and we created something that looks a little bit like this. This is running in a Google application, but we use MS Project, and it's really important you do this first because it will help you write the second very important part of your Part A exam, which is the project information document. So to do this part of the exam, you're going to need a blank document. So if you're doing the lesson with me, I'll give you access to this. You have access to this folder, and you need a blank document. Go here, Part A project initiation document, download that. If you're doing this online with YouTube, then I'll put in a link below, a link to the folder that I'm going to use to put all my resources in, and then you can download that. I'm just adding that right now. So here is a blank one, a blank project initiation document. So I'll rename that to blank, and then below it is a filled in one for this Part A scenario. So if you're doing this online, or even if you're doing it in the class and you just want to look at the Google Docs, it's up to you. Maybe you're doing it at home, you can, and you're just trying to go through it. If you go to this Unit 3 Project Management folder, there's 2 files so far. There's one for the first video, which has all the resources in, such as the resource report, the Gantt chart, the costings that we did in the first video. So I recommend you go and watch that first. There's also the Excel for costings. There's also the project file, which when you open up in this Google program, it looks a bit like that, and it's got the Gantt chart in, and just like in MS Project. Also, it has the Part A scenario in. It probably would make more sense if I put that Part A scenario in the root folder, so you can find that, because that's important for both the Gantt chart and filling in the PID. But everything else that's related to that first video is in that folder, and everything that's related to the second video, filling in the PID, is in this folder. So we're going to need to keep referring back to this Part A that I've put in that root folder. Because in the second part, you are going to have to fill in this blank PID. So if we open it up, this is what you'll get in the exam. There won't be any notes in it, like I have in my completed one. So you can see there's a completed one here, which is this one. And as I go through this, I'm going to talk you through the completed one and where I got all the information. I'm not actually going to fill it in while you're watching, because that's a bit boring and it will take too long. But I've already filled this in, and I've put some notes here. I've also created some lecture slides, and each one of these lecture slides, it tells you how to fill in a different part of this PID. So you've got several ways you can follow along with this. You can look at the completed one and look at these highlighted notes in each section. So for example, Project Aims has these bullet points. These are the things that you've got to go and find in this Part A scenario and then write up in here. Or you can look in the slides and you can look at the Project Aims slide, and that will have the same notes and also an example as well. So the first part that we have to do is we've got to fill in, this is the blank one. I'm just going to go through my completed one. You're going to have to fill in the project details. So the first thing you have to do is fill in the title. It's going to be Northeastern Airport Upgrades. Then you have to look for the project sponsor. The project sponsor is Mr. Ward. As it says in the introduction, Mr. Ward, the Director of Operations at the airport, has contacted MT Solutions. So he's the project sponsor. He's the one who is going to finance the project. So, and I'll just zoom that in so you can see it. It's a bit bigger. And I'll zoom this one in as well so you can just see it if it's a bit bigger if you're on a small screen. So Mr. Ward is the sponsor. The project client name is Northeastern Airport, so you'd write that. Then you put your project manager name. My name is Ben Smith, so I put that. Then you've got to put the start and end date of the project, which you find by reading the scenario. As I said, you need to spend at least 30 minutes reading the scenario so you can pick out the information, or at least you know where it is. That is here at the end. I've highlighted some of the important things. You can do that as well if you're looking at a PDF. Use the highlight tool. So it starts on the 3rd of Feb, finishes on the 3rd of April. So that's the next thing that you'd write there. Then you've got to put in your estimated cost. So you can't put this in until you've costed it up, which is what we did in the first video. But if I go back to my, well, you can either look at your cost report, or you can look at your spreadsheet. You can see that mine's 130,122, which is below the budget that they gave you, which is 150,000. Okay, so that's the first part. These are easy bits. The second part is document details. Document, all that is what version of the document is it? It's the first one. I put an arbitrary date of like the 3rd of January in here because I thought that this should be completed before the project starts, and the project starts in February. Then you put your name. Approvals. Approvals is the next section. Who's going to approve this document? Well, the senior people in the company. How can you find out who the senior people are? Go and look at that organisational chart. The senior people are the Director of Operations, Mr. Ward, who is the Director of Operations at the airport, and the Director of IT, Mrs. Evans. So he's the sponsor, and she is the Director of IT at MT Solutions, and you're the project manager there. So obviously they're the most senior people, and they're going to have to approve this document in which you very specifically say how much each member of staff is going to cost, what order are you going to do the task, that kind of thing. And they're going to look at it and go, yes, I approve, carry on with the project. Distribution, again, it's the same people that you've got here. So Mr. Ward and Mrs. Evans, that's their roles. The date is the start of the project, so they need to have approved it by then. So you're going to distribute it to them at that time. Maybe the airport would want to see it as well, but Mr. Ward works for the airport, so just put the people in on the organisational chart. Don't try and invent things that aren't there. So, next section, the purpose of the project initiation document. So, the purpose of this is to highlight the project aims, everything that you're going to do in the project, who's going to work on it, and how much each thing is going to cost. So a lot of this is a copy and paste job, right? The project aims. So if you want to follow this through, on the slides, we've just done approvals, slide 2, project aims is slide 3. What are the aims of this project? Well, basically they're the things that are listed at the beginning of part A scenario. So you'd go all the way up, you'd scroll all the way up to the beginning, and you would copy and paste all of this stuff here. So reduce record keeping errors, reduce check-in times, etc. Improve passenger efficiency. You can just copy and paste that and then put it into here. Maybe make it look a bit neater, because when you copy and paste from a PDF, sometimes it puts it in a strange format. Make it readable to the examiner, or keep in mind that if you were actually a project manager on a company and you were presenting this to report to directors, you would want it to look presentable and neat. So be professional. There's also an extra aim that is actually at the very end, which says the overall aim of this project is essentially by increasing efficiency and having more aircraft in the airport, because there's less aircraft there they're there for a short amount of time, so you can have more aircraft. So there'll be more aircraft, 10,000 to 95,000 in the first year. So make it more efficient and more profitable for the airport. So that's really easy. A lot of this is copy and paste. Project management and control. So these things, this is the next slide here. Project management and control. These things here are the things that you have to do as a project manager to make sure that this project is within budget, within schedule, and within and has good quality, right? So this is where you should write in sentences and paragraphs, and these are all the things that I kind of mentioned in the first video that you need to think about when you're planning out this project. Like, who are you going to put onto the tasks, right? Are you going to use senior developers for tasks that a junior developer could do? Are you going to use just one junior developer, or are you going to spread an activity out between three, so you could increase, if it's a very long activity, you could decrease the amount of time, although that will increase the cost. These are the decisions that you have to make. Also, you need to mention things like communication plan. Who are you going to communicate with in the business? How often and how? And risk. So, what things are you considered risky, and how are you going to mitigate that? How are you going to come up with a plan if one of those things happen? So, if we just read through what I said here, obviously you can pause this and read this yourself. You can also look at this document. You should perhaps be reading this as I'm talking about it. But I said, as a project manager, I want to make sure that the work was spread out between all the engineers that I had, so no one was overworked and the team was happy. Also, I considered putting more than one engineer on each task, so that meant that if one of them was sick, for example, the other one would be able to continue work. So that's managing risk, because if they're sick, then they can still do the work and it's not going to get behind in schedule. Also, I said that might increase the cost a bit, but it means that we're within schedule, but we still manage to stay within budget. I tried to build redundancy up. So this is talking about materials. We ordered 3 servers. So if one of them fails, if 2 of them fail, you've still got a backup, right? Also, if you're going to order multiple materials, perhaps there's a problem with delivery, you could imagine. And maybe if you've got 3 coming, perhaps if they're all from the same supplier, then that's a problem. But maybe you can mitigate risk by making sure that you get service from different suppliers, just in case one of them doesn't come along, unless you're guaranteed to have a very reliable one. Also, you want to build in extra testing time. That's something a project manager can do. That's actually something that you have to do, because it says, if we go to the part A bits of activities, and that's right at the end. So these are all the list of activities, the things that you have to project manage and create the Gantt chart for. But below it says, each test activity, I've highlighted this, will have at least two major faults and 3 minor. 2 days to rectify major, 1 day to rectify minor, 3 days for regression testing. So you can talk about that as if that's something that you thought would be a really good idea, and you built into it, because we built an extra 22 days into that. So each one of those testing tasks has an extra 22 days, so that it was possible for you to it's possible for you not to overrun. Also, you need to talk about a communication plan. So how are you going to communicate with all the different peoples in your teams, and why it's a good idea to think about that, to make sure everybody is kept informed about what's going on. The next one, this is quite a long thing to fill in, but if you do fill this in, it will help you fill in your SMART objectives, which are a very important part of it. And so whilst I'm talking about that, I might as well draw your attention to the mark scheme. So I'll also share this with you as well, but if you look in the folder, or that I put all these materials in, that is linked below, you can see a mark scheme from Unit 3. In this mark scheme, you can see that if filling in the project initiation document is 12 marks, and the key thing to fill in there is everything. Don't leave anything out, don't leave any blanks, but the SMART objectives are really important. SMART objective stands for, well, this comes a little bit later on in a different slide: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, right? So, but filling this bit in about background to proposed task will help you fill that in. That's all I'm saying. So the background to proposed work is, you've got to basically just list all these tasks. Develop a smartphone app, create a customized interface, develop a relational database. You've got to list all those tasks and say who's going to work on it, what date they'll start on it, when they'll finish on it, and how much it will cost, right? And I've split this into 3 separate sections. So there was software and back end, which is things like developing the smartphone app. And I copied this list again and then just expanded on it with the dates and the costings that that I figured out when we did in the first video the Gantt chart and the Excel spreadsheet. So, for example, I've put here develop a smartphone app, 11 general function points. For this task, I assigned a junior software engineer, so I would have gone and looked at my Gantt chart and seen who I put it on put on that task. The engineer will take 3 working days. Sorry, the engineer was assigned to it for about 3 weeks. Sorry, not 3 working days, or 13.2 days, 99 hours. So we budgeted £1,980 for it. The task will start on there, which I can get from my Gantt chart. So develop smartphone app task starts on the 3rd of February and it will end 14 days later on the 26th. So you need to sort of list that out for each one of those tasks. So we've got software and back end, building the app, the relational database, integrating it. Then I separate it out into hardware as well. So these are the hardware tasks, aren't they? You know, installing checkin disk, build and connect each server, install and configure each server. So I've listed those 3 tasks as well. Said who's going to work on it, how long it's going to take. I've got that information from our project initiation document and the costings from our project file. So I got those dates and the length of the task, not from the project initiation document, but from the project file and also from the costing spreadsheet. So I've listed each one of those things there. And then finally, there's a testing section. So there was those 3 testing tasks. Here, I've specifically said that we're factoring in 22 days extra for each testing task, which, although makes it quite expensive, has built in this redundancy in case of like errors and things, because the project is never going to be perfect at first. There's always going to be flaws, major and minor faults. But we've built that into server software testing, hardware testing, software and security testing. And the last section is training. So who's going to do the training? It was the software engineer. Again, I got that from our Gantt chart. How much did it cost? I looked it up on here, £360, and I wrote that in there. So this is a little bit of a laborious thing to do, but it's quite important. And you can actually just copy a lot of this information, and we might as well just jump to that section now. So once you've filled in all that information there, it's really important that you then jump to the SMART targets: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And this again is just a list of all the things that you've got to do. So everything listed here with the function points next to it. And all I did was, I'll show you an example. Well, I went to, say, the first software bit, develop the smartphone app. I copied that. And then I came down to here. Let's imagine there's nothing in there. So I copied the title in there. And then I cut out the stuff about dates. And then I pasted the dates and things into her. Dates and so date and comments. All you've really got to say is junior software engineer 1 just will take this much time, 14 days. You could say something about the budget, and you could say, and you just leave that text in there about when you start and finish it. And just do the same with all the other tasks. But it's really important that you fill in these SMART tasks, because if you look in this mark scheme that I shared with you, one of the things it says are really important, as well as filling everything in and having a logical chain of reasoning throughout your PID, is the SMART objectives. So they've been identified and are specific and time constrained. So you've shown how it's all going to fit in and that everything's going to be within time and budget. So so this section up here where it says background to proposed work, I'll make that a little bit bigger, make the title a little bit bigger. Background to proposed work, listing all the tasks and the time scales. Also, you need to talk about physical resources as well. So that would be the servers and everything, which I think I just left out. If I just copy that in, so we go to, so you've got to say, although that will come later on in materials as well, they want you to repeat a lot of the information in several different places. So, but you just need to put one sentence basically about how many servers you need and check-in terminals and network infrastructure. So I'll put another section, materials, and that is everything that you need to say in background to proposed work. So the next bit, so you filled in background to proposed work, you can then fill in the table for SMART objectives, which is a little bit later on. The next thing is the purpose of the project. All you've got to do here for the purpose of the project is put into a sentence or a paragraph these aims that they've got at the beginning, which again are listed in bullet points. These ones here, like reduced record keeping errors, reduced check-in times, etc. Those are the aims of it. And so if you read what I said here, you're just detailing the main purpose of the project. The airport project's purpose was to improve passenger efficiency of movement by at least 30%, so decrease the time the aircraft at the airport, therefore allowing for more flights in and out. Result that you get an increase from 10,000 to 95,000 flights, increasing efficiency and profitability. So again, it's a very simple thing. If you're running out of time in the exam or anything, you can just copy and paste in that list. Responsibilities. So this is another copy and paste thing. You have to list all the different resources that you've got. So if we come down to after the organisational chart and how much each one costs, like this stuff here, junior network engineers, and then there's information about they needing 9 hours per general function point. So basically, really what I did was I just copied this and I pasted it into here underneath responsibilities, because all you've got to do is outline in brief the key roles and responsibilities of each staff member. So the first thing I actually said was that who are the director of IT and director of operations, and I said that I report to them. But my team are the people below me, and I've just copied and pasted in what they can do. So for example, junior network engineers will work on installing check-in desks, installing network infrastructure, hardware testing, security testing. And that's just something I copied in from the report, and I've done that all the way through. Next bit, materials. So this is where you can go to your costing spreadsheet, and you just copy this and paste it into the material section as it is, as a table, and it will show how many of each thing you need, how much they're going to cost, and the total. Easy. So SMART objectives, you should have already done this when you did background to proposed work. Background to proposed work is listing everything, who's going to work on it, dates, how much it's going to cost, and the SMART objectives is basically the same thing, but you're just putting it into a table and saying whether or not it's been achieved. So like I showed you, for each SMART objective or each activity, I've said who's going to work on it and how long it's going to take and some dates. And I've copied that from that other section. You could, if you wanted, like fill this in first before you do that section, that background to proposed work. But this bit must show the dates and who's going to work and the objective and whether it's been achieved. It's very important, this bit, because it's a major part of the mark scheme for getting those 10 to 12 marks. And where has it gone? My document's disappeared. I better reload that. Not sure where it went. Yeah, here we go. So again, if you're also looking at the slides, so we've gone through background to proposed work, purpose of the project, the responsibilities, copy and paste from your scenario, part A scenario, the materials, you copy and paste that from your costing spreadsheet. SMART objectives is a copy and paste job from the background to proposed work, where you detail what objective and what date is going to be finished by. I've got some more examples there. You see, like, you could write less than I wrote if you want, but I just copied and pasted it so it was quick. Scope. So it's scope now. Scope is something you need to define as a project manager, so you don't get something called scope creep. If you get scope creep, then people can come along during the project and go, hey, how about we have this? You know, maybe the smartphone could do this, or we could have an extra database to do that. And it's very important that you set out from the beginning what the scope of this project is, so that anything extra than that, it's not that that can't ever be done, it's just that that needs to be another project or another sprint if you're working in Agile. You've got to commit to doing certain things and not let anyone else get in the way of that, right? So, for example, I said scope. This project will simply allow people coming to the airport to check in advance on their smartphones, reducing queues, increasing flow of people, reducing the staff needed as the check-in will be automatic. It allows for more flights to take off and landing, increasing profits for the airport. There will be a system to allow the database to be updated easily through an interface. New check-in desks will be built in the terminal and some backup servers. So that is everything but, and again, you know, it's just another interpretation of what they've said at the beginning. So if you wanted to, if you haven't got the time to write a whole sentence like that, you could just copy that. Those are the aims, right? That's the scope of the project. It's about finding this information and getting it into this document as quickly as you can. Again, business cases. Business cases are just that list at the beginning. They're provided in the assignment brief. You can copy and paste them in. They discuss the points. There's things like timescales. Perhaps you could discuss timescales, budgets, and return on investment and risks here. But really, it's the list of those tasks that they give you at the beginning. And I say something at the end about the business case. So I've said that when the project's going to start, when it's going to end, how much it's going to cost. It was 130,000 and 122. I'll just correct that. 122. And also mentions the risks that could happen. We're assuming that everything is going to be delivered on time. It's not going to break, but I'm trying to mitigate against that. But you don't have to talk about too much there. You just have to talk about the business case and things that make this a viable project so it can make money. This next bit is really important. So referring back to the mark scheme, to be honest, this is one of the most important things. Assumptions, constraints, and risks, and communication plan. They all carry, if you look here, separate marks. So 6 marks for risk planning, 4 marks for communication planning. So if you have a clear idea about what you're going to say in those sections, which you kind of should have by now because you've done the Gantt chart and you've read the scenario, jump to those sections and fill that bit in. So assumptions are things that you assume but may or may not happen. To be honest, we should never assume anything, because if you assume stuff, it makes an ass out of you and me. So, and these are also things you don't have to invent. They're taken from the project scenario. And let's just jump straight to some examples. So we're assuming that this project will improve passenger efficiency movement by 30%. Mr. Ward has requested that. So I say, who is that validated by? What's his status? Like, where does he work? My comment here was like, well, we don't know. Maybe it might slow things down because the system could crash or something and people won't be able to check in. But we're assuming that is going to be the overall aim and it's going to work. We're assuming there's going to be more flights in and out of the airport, but that's only going to happen if the actual system does make things more efficient. We're also assuming things like the staff will be trained on the systems. But if staff are sick and they're not for the training, then they might miss out on how to use it. We're also assuming that our staff are going to be there every day, no one's going to be sick. This is only a problem if you've got one person on each task. So if you can, and it doesn't make your project planning too complicated, try and think about putting at least another person on each task. We're assuming the equipment's going to be delivered on time. We're assuming the scope will stay the same. If it doesn't, because someone very senior says you need that, it's going to change budget and timescales. And so on and so on. So have a read through these assumptions. These are things that you can be creative about, but they should come from the scenario. Don't make up some things like, we assume that there's not going to be a nuclear war. It's like, well, yeah, right, but like it's not really related to the project. So constraints. What things constrain your project? What time, money, and quality, essentially. So, for example, app and also dependencies, right? We're constrained by certain tasks being finished before other tasks. For example, the app and database must be finished before they're integrated. But what happens if someone's sick on app development team or the database team? There's only one senior. If you look at our project Gantt chart, the senior software engineer is working on developing the relational database. What if he's not available or he's sick or something? That will slow down the project because we won't be able to integrate the app. If there's no app, then customers can't use the system. Therefore, there's no quick check-in system anymore. So that's a constraint, task being finished. We're constrained by staff. There's only one senior dev on network and software. So if they're sick or something, then things may get behind. We're also constrained by, for example, here I said there's a lot of work for junior engineers. So this is a staffing constraint. So and that might constrain us on timescales or schedule. So if those junior engineers have a problem, if one of them's sick, if they're not very good, then will we be able to deliver quality software on time? We don't know. So what things are going to constrain you on your time, money, and the quality? Perhaps a constraint could be like delivery of things. We don't know if that's going to happen. Is everything going to come on time? So, and all of this leads into your risk management strategy, and so it's really important you fill in those tables, and especially this one, because here you need to say what you're going to happen if those things that you've talked about before do actually occur. So, what is a risk? A senior software engineer being sick, okay? And then you have to give it a number score. So you have to give it a probability. What's the probability of that happening? Probably quite a lot. and you give it a score out of 3. So 1 for not very likely, 2 for maybe likely, and 3 for extremely likely. So I think it's quite likely, so maybe he's going to be sick. The impact of him being sick, because he's the only engineer on some of these tasks, is going to be quite high. So we're going to give that a 3 out of 3. Therefore, the severity is 2 times 3, so 6. So 9 being the highest score, because 3 times 3 is 9. But what are we going to do if he is sick? Well, we can hire another senior dev perhaps, or we can contract someone out. But the problem with that is that we're constrained by budget, and contracting people is very expensive. It could also push out the schedule as well. Other risks are junior devs don't produce good software. I gave that a 2 for probability, a 3 for impact, therefore a 6 for overall severity. Make sure that you hire people who are good at it. Make sure that you put a couple of junior devs on it, so that maybe they can learn from each other or check each other's errors. So really this is like taking all the assumptions and then explaining them as risks and what might happen if that occurs and how likely it is to occur. So it's really important you fill this matrix out as they want it using these numbers, and don't write. I've seen some people write stuff in here like medium probability, low impact, high severity. Well, no, write the number in and then do the calculation. Okay, and if you look at the mark scheme, there are 6 marks for risk planning. And how do you get those marks? Correct application of risk analysis methodology to risk planning process to create a full and accurate risk plan with appropriate contingency plans. There's a consideration of the relevant risks using logical chains of reasoning. Okay, so you've got to be able to analyze the risks using the correct methodology, i.e. the numbers in this table, okay, and then say what your contingency plan is. Getting to the end of this now, so deliverables. What have you got a list here? Again, it's the list of things that you in the scenario that it says here. Well, it could be these things that Mr. Ward wants, but what things do you need to deliver for this system? Well, they're listed here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Basically, it's the activities: deliver a database, a smartphone app, network infrastructure. And you just copy them into this table. And then you have to say, for example, for a relational database, you need to say, what components do we need to make that work? Well, we need a server, and we need some software. How do I know that? Because, well, it's obvious, isn't it? To make a database, you're going to need to have that database hosted on a server, and then you're going to need software as is listed in the materials here. So you've got to say what components are needed. And what is that going to do? Well, it's going to store things like flight details, check-in details of customers, and collect other information. Another example of a deliverable would be the smartphone app. What are the components of it? Well, it needs an app and it needs a database. And why do you need it? It's the interface for customers to check in. So just list all those things that you've read in the scenario, you've probably found at the beginning in the description of all the things you need to make this system work. Okay, stakeholders. So stakeholders, you are a stakeholder. Everyone involved in the project is a stakeholder. MT Solutions, the company you're working for, are a stakeholder. They're the ones who are going to get sued if this project doesn't work properly. Northeastern Airport they're the client, so they're definitely a stakeholder. The Director of IT, Mrs. Evans, Director of Operations, Mr. Ward. And you have to then say who all of these are, including Project Manager. And I think you should put in one more. I'm going to add that in, if I can. I'm going to add another row. I wanted to add another row in here. Maybe I'll make it smaller. I'll see with the options. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to add in a row below, and I'm going to add in the development team. They are a stakeholder. You don't have to list junior network engineer 1, junior network engineer 2, 3, 4, 5. Just say the whole team. So junior, and maybe brackets, junior and senior software and network engineers and database admin. So just say who they are and what is their responsibility. They develop the project. But for example, so that's they are stakeholders because they work on it. But what's the project management? You're the project manager. What's your responsibility in this as a stakeholder? Well, ultimately, if the project doesn't go well, you're going to get blamed. So you have to deliver that project on time and in budget and good quality. So just list all the people. Again, another easy task. By this point, you've read the scenario, you've done the Gantt chart, it should be obvious. Project management team structure, organizational chart. This is super simple. Just go to the scenario and take a screenshot of this and paste it into here, and that will show the organizational structure. So communication plan. As I said at the beginning, this is really important part to fill in, because if you look at the mark scheme, there are 4 separate marks. So for doing the risk planning and the communication planning, you get 10 marks. So it's almost worth jumping to them because they're specific sections and filling them in and making sure they're filled in immediately, because that's where you'll get some marks. But you do also need to make sure that you do everything else, especially the SMART targets, because that carries 12 marks. Don't leave anything out. But the communication plan, what's that about? Well, remember we talked about what you needed to do, what you said you were going to do as a project manager to make the project run well. One of the things is to communicate with people. So you need to communicate with the directors, with the client, and with your team. And you need to say, so the stakeholder, in this table you've got stakeholder, for example, Mr. Ward, he's a stakeholder, director of operations. How often do you need to communicate with him? The frequency, where necessary. And you need to communicate with him perhaps face to face, perhaps email as well, maybe Teams or Zoom, depending on where he is. Maybe he's busy. When, why do you need to? Because maybe you need to discuss hiring and firing people, or just give an overall report. Let's skip on to another one. The development team. When do you need to communicate with them? Daily, face to face. Normally a project manager would have a stand-up meeting every morning with the team to find out any issues. Really, the senior engineers, like senior software and network engineers, which I listed as another set of people you need to communicate with, they're the people who are going to give you reports about the team, about what's going on the factory floor. But you also need to sort of have some contact with your development team and just figure out anything that they need to help them do their job better. And that is everything you need to fill in. So what I really advise that you do is listen to this video and look at the documents that are linked below this video. It's in the folder, as I said. It's in the Unit 3 folder. You'd go to number 2, filling in the PID documents. There's the completed one that I've just taken you through, a blank one that you've got to fill in, and then these lecture slides. And these lecture slides are a summary of all the information with examples that I've just gone through. But obviously, if you look through the completed PID, you will also see those examples in there as well. Use the timestamps in this video to skip forward to bits that you need to go over. And yeah, good luck.